Jacinda Ardern has called it her generation's nuclear-free issue, but tackling climate change hasn't featured much in the election campaign yet. We have new details for you this morning, though, on how some of our top businesses want any future government to deal with climate change. Sustainable Business Council Executive Director Abbie Reynolds is here. Kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora.
Let's start off with how you collate information, how you go about asking businesses what they want to see.
Great question. So we have 90 members or thereabouts, and what we did was we surveyed them around which of the sustainable development goals they thought were most important. We collated that information and then we held a few dinners with some of the most senior leaders to really try and dig into the detail to understand what sat behind those responses.
Are these all greeny businesses?
Look, I don't think that's the way they describe themselves. Do they care about climate change? Absolutely. Do they see that this is a future risk for their business? Absolutely. Do they think their customers care about it? Absolutely.
See, that's the interesting nuance around this issue, isn't it? Looking at climate change from a business perspective, it is likely to affect businesses' bottom line, as well as all the ethical complications that come through climate change.
Absolutely. So what we're starting to see is that our businesses recognise that this is a strategic issue. They're starting to think really hard about how they are going to navigate this future. And so that's why we've done this manifesto. It's as much an offer as a manifesto. What they're saying to the government is, we want to work with you on this. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we think it's important. Here's what we'd like to do with you.
And what do they want to do?
So one of the things that they'd really like to be able to do is work with the government to figure out what our long-term pathway is to decarbonising our economy. We'd really like to be able to help the government do this in a depoliticised, cross-party way as well.
Yeah, we need to actually set some goals about when New Zealand is going to be carbon neutral and how we go about achieving that goal.
And I think the really great news, and the thing that I'd love more New Zealanders to know, is that a really big bunch of our businesses, and it's growing every day, are setting really ambitious long-term targets. So Toyota and Fujitsu have committed to being net zero by 2050, and I'm seeing more and more of our members set even more stretching targets. So it's really exciting. Business has got the bit between its teeth on this issue.
But does business feel as though the government response to climate change or approach to future issues in climate change is a bit disparate at the moment?
I think what business is waiting for is for the election to be over so we can start to really have the good conversations about what it's going to take for us to move to a low carbon economy. So we know it's complicated, we know it's going to take real effort and work, and we know we need to do that with the government. And we know we've got to do that in conversation with them. It's
interesting to step back and look at this election campaign. We had, until the weekend, very little conversation on climate change, even from the Greens, who, for most of their campaign, have been talking about poverty, or at least that's where the media headlines have been. Have you been a little bit disencouraged by that?
I guess we've been having conversations with the parties about our election manifesto, and so we've had the opportunity to hear what they have to say and their level of concern around it. So I suppose from my sense, actually we know they're all thinking about it. It hasn't had the profile publicly that perhaps our members think it deserves.
What political parties have policy or approaches that align with what your businesses want to see?
I think our businesses haven't made a policy request. What they've said is, we want to work with you on how we're going to transition to a net zero economy. We get that that's complicated and we don't want to muddy the waters by saying, here's our policy prescription for that. This is genuinely an offer to say, we need to figure this out together.
Is there a consensus, though, that New Zealand isn't doing enough?
I think there's a consensus from a lot of my members that they need government to be in partnership with us on this, because there's a point at which their actions hit a ceiling if they haven't got government supporting them to do things. So, a neat example is Z Energy. They've invested in a biodiesel plant because they're really trying to front foot this, and they're probably one of the only companies in the world that's had to do that without government assistance. So what our businesses are really looking for is, what are the kinds of conversations we can be having to make this transition happen fast?
You want to get them all in electric cars like you drove here in this morning?
Certainly, we have got some of our members who are huge advocates for them.
Yeah.
I'd call out Air New Zealand, Mercury Energy, Westpac. They have worked really tirelessly to bring business leaders together and really encourage them to get into electric vehicles. So I feel like I'm part of the crowd on that rather than right out front.
Very good. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Jab.